The collapse of the US dollar is starting. De-dollarization is hitting all-time highs. The US dollar is about to lose its reserve currency status. These are topics that have been getting discussed around this space and even around finance for years now. And it might seem like it's an echo chamber, but what if I told you that there's a much bigger plan behind all of this? And it's all unfolding at this current point in time, especially as we do start to see some big names like even the Fed confirming a big accelerated push towards stablecoins. Well, sit back, relax. Welcome to the channel, everyone. My name is Nick. For those that are new to the channel, by the end of this video, you do become a subscriber. So we recently saw Gold Telegraph put out a post regarding how the dollar has lost over 35% of its purchasing power in just the past 1 year. Everything is starting to play out. Now, I have been tracking the purchasing power of the US dollar. If you look at the actual chart for it, going back to like the beginning of the 1900s, it's quite sad how much value has been siphoned out of the US dollar. And it's not just, over time, yeah, the dollar has lost value. It's lost value because of the plan of action. Like if we actually think about it, right? The dollar took a massive hit from the inception of the Fed. And then after we got rid of the gold standard, it just went downhill completely. This was by plan. It's something that's been ongoing for decades, leading us to this point in time. Now, you could say that it's ridiculous, that there's no way that this was all planned out for decades, but just stick around and watch the rest of this video because I'm going to go over a lot of things behind what's really going on here. Number one, let's actually start off with this video clip that I saw come up, and it really kind of talks about how we just hit a brick wall. This is a unsustainable level of debt that we are now at, and it's not just debt though, right? It's the global impact of our debt and the printing of the US dollar as well. We have here United States. There's a distrust of this treasury, not just because it was weaponized, but also because our public debt is unsustainable, irrational, and unbelievable. Slowly but surely, not overnight, but countries are moving away from the US dollar. And this is something that I have voiced on this channel. Death of 1,000 cuts. Yeah, it's not happening overnight, but it is happening. And it's in progress right now. Now, this is from Matthew Piepenberg. Check it out.
Since we sanctioned the dollar or sanctioned Russia and froze their FX reserves and their U.S. Treasury access, Eastern central banks particularly, but central banks around the world, prior to that, were buying about 118 tons of gold a year. After 2022, the amount is now about 290. You've got to see there's a causation and correlation here. There's a distrust of this treasury, not just because it was weaponized, but also because our public debt is unsustainable, irrational, and unbelievable. And so it's an unwanted asset from a discredited issuer, and it's also weaponized. So these are major signs of countries, central banks, and economies slowly but surely, not overnight, but clearly moving away from the US dollar.
Now listen, this is exactly what's happening. We have weaponized the dollar. We have grossly printed it over the, last few decades. And yeah, the debt is at unsustainable levels while we continue to hear individuals like Janet Yellen tell us that it's not at unsustainable levels. Even Jerome Powell also voiced the same exact thing. We need to actually be honest with ourselves here. Unless there's a bigger plan behind all of this. Do they want the collapse? Do they want to usher in a new system? Yes, that's the plan. They want to collapse this old system and usher in a new one. Now, here we actually have another part of this where it's just a quote. We're going to read this quote. Matt went on to say that Santa Claus can't fix a liquidity crisis when you're sitting on $37 trillion. $37 trillion in public debt and over $100 trillion across households, corporations, and governments combined. Yeah, this is the big issue. And it's an issue that I think that we all need to be aware of. The US is drowning in debt at the same exact time that we continue to see every other nation moving back against the dollar. Now, on top of that, right, we do think about gold. Now, I saw a great video clip get posted by Andy Schechtman, and this was regarding gold getting reclassified as a tier 1 reserve asset. Central banks are hoarding it. A new currency is being built around it. Even the US is importing it. What do they know that the public doesn't? Check this out.
If you take a step back and you are really being honest with yourself, ask yourself, why would the most powerful bank in the world in 2019 reclassify gold as the world's only other tier 1 reserve asset? And along those lines, why would the most well-funded and well-informed traders on the globe, the central banks, go on a repatriation and a buying spree since 2017 that the world has never seen before? Why would that continue unabated? And bring it closer to home, why would the United States become net importer since November of the world's only other tier 1 reserve asset? And when we see the countries around the world that are voraciously accumulating gold, there's talks of it being pegged to a new system, as we were told by Dilma Rousseff, the former president of Brazil and the head of the new development bank, that they've agreed in principle to a new settlement currency called the unit, which is 40% gold backed and redeemable upon demand. And everywhere we look, from accumulation to repatriation to reclassification to slow moving higher, or even Judy Shelton, who you interviewed, who has told me flat out Trump is going, by her belief, will issue gold-backed treasuries next July 2026, the 250th year anniversary.
And, this might sound ridiculous, but if you actually think about it, this is happening. Like, these are actual facts. And what's crazy about all of this is that most people completely forgot about the push on gold-backed currencies over the last roughly 24 months. Major nations pushing towards gold-backed currencies, even states within the US trying to get a gold currency launched. Texas was a big player around that. When we think about what's going on here, yeah, we are starting to see a big shift, and it, pertains back to the US dollar, and the reserve status is 100% in question. Now, we just saw a big update from a US bond giant. PIMCO is warning that the US dollar's reserve currency status is not guaranteed. If global capital flows into US assets, so we're talking about the global flows, if that starts to dwindle around US assets, it could point towards a more multipolar world with a diminished reliance on a singular reserve currency. This is something that I have talked about on this channel. In fact, guess what other nations have been calling for a multipolar world? The BRICS. And if you think that this is not all planned, go back to 2022, specifically March, when we announced the sanctions on Russia. A day later, not even a full 24 hours later, Executive Order 14067 drops, highlighting the push on digital currencies within the US. And what's crazy about the whole idea of multiple reserve currencies? Yeah, let's go back to July 4th of 2023. So we're now going back almost 2 years ago, and I put out a post, and I said I strongly believe that we are headed in the direction of a non-reserve currency global financial system. We will see CBDCs decentralize the global economy combined with retail use of government-issued stablecoins. My thought process is that CBDCs will be primarily for wholesale and banks, while stablecoins will be retail-driven. Retail won't see or use CBDCs. It's the same exact story that's happening in the US right now. We see the Trump admin pushing for stablecoins heavily. They are saying that it's going to support the US dollar's reserve currency status. It's going to reinforce the US dollar. It's going to make the US extremely strong around digital assets and crypto. But guess what? It's not just US based stablecoins that are starting to launch. The UK is pushing forward on this. Europe is pushing forward on this. The BRICS just recently announced that they're pushing forward on this in terms of Russia. So when we think about what's going on here, stablecoins are rising. I said that this will all be driven and connected by private and public ledger technology. Interoperability will be crucial for this new system, but also bridge currencies will 100% be needed. The days of reserve currencies will be behind us, where nations will be responsible for their own economic life cycle. If the US wants to destroy their economy, they can, but other nations shouldn't suffer too. This new system will allow this to become a reality. I know we focus on the negative ideas around CBDCs and this new system heavily, but there could be also a world where it's not so dystopian. CBDCs are inevitable, but this new system can have CBDCs, stablecoins, and digital currencies coexist. And of course, I did outline the projects that I was looking at during that time. But what's crazy about this is all the big elite companies and organizations are pushing on this. They're already trialing this. They are experimenting with this type of technology. It's crazy to me that more people don't realize what's going on at this current point in time. We know that the world is moving away from fiat currencies. Fiat currencies are starting to collapse. They're starting to fall. They're starting to get devalued. This is where we look at what comes next. What's happening right now? Are we seeing the self-destruction of the old financial system to usher in the new? In my opinion, we are. A lot of these things that we question that, makes no sense at all. For an example, Janet Yellen and Jerome Powell talking about how the US debt is not unsustainable and that we're actually on a very good path. How? When Janet Yellen told us back in 2023 that her plan of action is to print more money to $50 trillion by 2030. That does not sound like a sustainable path. That sounds like a recipe for disaster. A disaster that they want. A disaster that's actually, being manifested by these big players that are telling us what we want to hear. But it's also what this admin is also planning. Just like the admin before. It doesn't matter about Republican or Democrat, they're pushing for the same exact thing. How do we know this? Well, because under Biden, we got sanctions. Under Biden, we got Executive Order 14067. And under Trump, we now have stablecoins being focused on. It's the same story here. We are seeing the new system being pushed. Even here, we have breaking. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent announces focus on regulatory challenges for blockchain, stablecoins, and new payment systems. If you go back to January, we also heard this, from Scott as well. We are going to keep the U.S. the dominant reserve currency in the world, and we will use stablecoins to do that. They already outlined the plan here. And what's crazy about all of this is that, we witnessed this. We already witnessed this happening before they told us the plan. But this is why I am 100% focused on the dollar. I'm focused on the reserve currency status because the reserve currency life cycle is well overdue, which means we need a new reserve currency or we need something that's completely different. And that's what I personally believe we are starting to witness. I think that we are witnessing the death of the old reserve currency, the old reserve currency system. And we're now going to be ushering into a multipolar world where there's going to be multiple reserve currencies. They're not going to be the exact same thing that we think about, today. I think every single nation will have their own reserves. This will be tokenized in form of either, stablecoins or CBDCs or both. On top of that, all of it will be bridged by decentralized currencies. And where does gold play a role? Because again, we're focused on gold because all of these central banks and these big banks are, buying up gold at massive rates. Well, guess what? It all gets linked back to gold. Gold is now tokenized on chain, backed 1-to-1. Okay. But outside of that, you can now tokenize gold. You could revalue gold fractionalize it, have, CBDCs and stablecoins tied back to a specific weight in gold, and bridged by, a currency that could also be valued at, a specific, weight in gold. Like, when we're thinking about what's going on here, all of the pieces are falling into place. All we have to do is watch everything, watch this entire plan, if you will, unfold, which feels like it is, in real time. So far in the last roughly 5-6 months, everything around digital currencies, around crypto, it's all accelerating in a major way, which is what I think everyone needs to be aware of. It feels as if we're back in 2020, where we saw COVID hit the markets, and then after that, we saw an accelerated push on digital currencies. Because even then, the excuse was, physical cash usage is dropping significantly. We need digital currencies. We need to make sure that the US is ahead of, the competition. Because everyone was moving, like even China, right? With their CBDC, they were pushing forward. So immediately after that, what we saw was, early stage experiments of digital dollar-based projects. Again, this is the same exact story here, except what's accelerating it? The trade war, tariffs, the pushback on the dollar. And also, this all revolves around Russia and the BRICS and what they're doing. Again, it's problem, reaction, solution. The solution is already there. They're telling us, and we're already starting to push forward into this new system. You need to wake up and be aware of this. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, definitely leave a like, subscribe, to notifications on because of more free content. You guys are more than welcome to follow me on Twitter and join the free Discord in the description below. And with that being said, guys, this has been Nick. Thanks for watching. Peace out.